Ripe Fruit is a nonprofit education initiative dedicated to identifying and strengthening innate skills as they appear along the spectrum of ways we think and learn. Our mission is to infuse mainstream learning with enhanced curriculum, customized lesson plans, and demonstrated creative systems. We aim to foster comprehensive learning, enthusiasm, and confidence for all students. The DEI+N Talks serves as a conduit, think tank, and intensive to discuss how to identify and support unique learning styles. All systems are go. The DEI+N Talks starts now. Welcome to the Creative Entrepreneur edition of the DEI+N Talks. Many entrepreneurs discovered their paths because they didn't see their purpose being realized in existing organizations and missions. Some only saw support in a system they built themselves, and some only found success as they were able to define and illustrate it in efforts that they erected. From college leap year to the serial entrepreneur, we seek to learn, celebrate, and understand how to best support those who just don't find belongingness working for others and explore their own path. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of hosts or sponsors of Ripe Fruit Foundation. This information is not intended to replace therapeutic or medical advice. This session is being recorded. We're going to start this session off with, well, the first thing I'm going to do is introduce myself. My name is Stephen Kane. I'll be hosting the DEI+N Talks. We're going to start this session off with Stacy Elder, owner of the Appalachian Center.
I didn't plan to be an entrepreneur. I was going to go to grad school. But survival. Well, how am I going to, this lady's talking about it's over. You got to get out of my office by the end of business today. I still had bills. I'm like, shoot, I got bills. What am I supposed to do? You know, so I really had to get busy. And so my partner and I, who both of us lost our jobs on the same day, you know, we got together and we talked about it. We cried, then we prayed, and then we got a plan together, and then we got busy, right? So that was, I guess, survival. But then we had to figure out how we were going to do this thing, right? Because when you're operating from the survival mode, you're not operating from the place of, oh yes, I've done my research and I have my business plan now. I've got my investors. I've got my angel investor. I've got my people, my board of counselors and people who are going to be talking to me and supporting me. They're not there either, okay? You don't have any of that. What you have is, I got bills. I need to get a business. And I need to make that happen AS and AP, okay? But we did have a foundation in that we have been going to seminars on business, and not just how to do electrolysis, but the business. Because you need to know both things. The content, which is the electrolysis, but you also got to know how to run the business. So you do have to have a foundation of some sort if you intend to have any sort of success. Whether you're going to be trial and error from the time you were a young person, and then other people seeing that you're trying to be in business and they will help you and tell you stuff. Whether you start, you work in somebody else's office, which is what we did, and you begin to learn certain things and you supplement that through workshops and this kind of thing. So then you find one day the floor falls out from behind you and you got to start a business in 2 days. But if you're already thinking about it, then you're ready. So we have been thinking about it, which is what one of the workshops said to do, okay? Have a plan A, B, C, and D. So I think that there is, on a certain level, there is a spirit of entrepreneurship. And that is where we found people who were going to do, they're going to be in business, they're going to make something happen, they're going to develop money. I mean, I think we see that, and, people like Elon Musk and others, inventors and people who start businesses and they start another business and they get another business. They do have some kind of spirit of entrepreneurship. But I think also, if you stay in business past a certain time, you develop a sort of sense or spirit, energy of, I'm in business and I'm going to be in business. I was letting other people I was trying to meet other people's expectations. That's why I call it a trick box, right? I don't know when that must have been my sophomore year. I was on the gospel choir, and there were some people on there, and they know Jesus, and people want to help you, and you talk too much, you cuss too much, you too loud, you too this, you too that. It's a trick box. And you want to be, and we went to a predominantly white school. It's the Quakers. You got to fit in. You got to do all this. And all that, come over to me. All that got me feeling bad and ineffective. But it did cause me to think, now that I think about it, it did cause me to think about what I was going through and to recognize that part of the problem I was experiencing is because I'm trying to be somebody, as you said, that I wasn't. I always do better when I'm me. Dave Chappelle.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Dave Chappelle, right. Who told him he could do that kind of thing? People say, oh my God, you can't say that?
It was very risky.
Okay, my God, you can't do that?
So there's risk.
It is risk. But there's also discipline, because even though we look at that, you don't think that skit came into fruition without discipline, without sitting down, without writing it, without running past, seeing what jokes really work, what jokes don't work. So there is a part of discipline that comes, and that can be imposed, and no learning can occur if you don't have any kind of discipline.
It's like 3 hours, 2 hours at a time. Like, I'm just different. I mean, honestly, I dropped out of college when I was 18, and then I came back to college when I was 24 because of that. And I'm glad you mentioned, like, practical. Like, I'm more of, like, a tactile learner. Like, I need to be hands-on. And another thing that helped me, especially because I went to business school, like, it's my hair business. And, like, this case can apply to, like, how I'm scaling my business. Like, I have to figure out a way to make it more interesting so I can understand, like, the concepts that is being taught to me versus, like, what examples are given to me.
That was an excellent kind of introductory piece from about just what drives the creative entrepreneur. And as we just heard, what was released to us was that that was driven out of pure necessity, which is certainly going to be a different driver than if you have the luxury of kind of going at a different pace and reviewing your creativity more and things like that. What was just disclosed to us by Stacey Elder was she had to get creative immediately in order to pay her bills due to the fact that she lost her job. So that is a kind of a real world example. What I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's get our panel introduced, and then we have another video snippet to watch. But first, let's introduce our panel for the creative entrepreneur session of the Dean Talks. First up on our panel introduction is Nicole Fall. Nicole, welcome to the Dean Talks, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Hi. I'm an artist and an educator, and they have come together. I was a professor at an associate professor at Baltimore City Community College for 8.5 years, and I was a founding teacher at Carver Center for Arts and Technology. I've worked in I started out working in senior centers. And also I have a long history of working in community arts, providing after-school arts programming. And my focus is really helping people realize their independent thinking skills and really be their most powerful selves.
All right, awesome. Once again, welcome. Keisha Reed, thank you for joining us on the panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Keisha. I'm a community builder first, born and raised in Washington, D.C. I currently do community building work in Maryland around the cannabis industry. I provide pathways through my organization, Explore Maryland Cannabis, for individuals who are looking to start a business or start a career in the cannabis industry. And I'm super, super, super honored to be here today. Thank you.
And once again, we're so honored to also have you here. Marsha Reeves Jews, welcome to the panel.
Well, thank you. It's great being here, and thank you for the invitation. This is wonderful. Marsha Reeves Jews is a serial entrepreneur. We have Marsha Jews and Company, where we do all types of conferences, expositions, where we're dealing primarily with organizations that are dealing with folks who are of color And so involved with the Women of Color STEM Conference and the Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference. And so most of the things that I do that are conference related fall within those areas. I have WKIM, We Keep It Moving, is a network that we are building with a variety of hosts. So we keep busy, and we're going to stay busy, because if you get too much downtime, you know, there's a devil's workshop. So I have to keep it moving is my motto.
Okay, outstanding. Brian Furr, welcome to the Dean Talks.
Hello, how are you doing? My name is Brian Furr. Just as a note, I am a super extrovert, so I'm about to bring the energy. My name is Brian Furr. I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally. I'm living in Baltimore, Maryland now. I am a family man first, put God first, just as a note. But I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I enjoy what I do. And if I don't enjoy it, then I keep it moving. And the biggest thing to know about me is I tend to put 110% in every single thing that I do, which can lead to burnout. So I want to go and talk about bits and pieces of that, the ebbs and flows of like entrepreneurship. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Pleasure to meet you guys.
Okay, and we're glad to have you on. Nice, well-rounded panel of entrepreneurs here for this particular session of the Dean Talks. And this is a really unique session because here we are sharing stories and sharing experiences that can be turned around and utilized and used as a platform for motivation for others. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to take a look and check on our next video snippet, which would be an interview with Mark Bates. If Mark is ready to roll, go ahead. If not, I will continue with my questions. Let's go ahead and ask the first question. And then we will, we'll just move Mark in after that. So our first question for our panel is, how would you frame entrepreneurship? Some say it's something that you're innate with. Sometimes it's something that you do for survival, or is it even being referred to as spirit, as in the spirit of entrepreneurship? We're going to let Brian start off with that question.
Definitely. So let me just mention, I am a serial entrepreneur, and I use that terminology often. I feel like I was almost born an entrepreneur. I grew up with a first generation American background. My family is from Jamaica, and a lot of people had hustle. And hustle and entrepreneurship have similarities, but there's some serious differences. Hustle is the ability to make a dollar, or make a quick flip, or buy something low and sell it a little high. And there's bits of entrepreneurship in that. But entrepreneurship, as I see it, is more of understanding how to build a business sustainably, how to create processes and procedures to help you scale, and more than anything, to create opportunities for yourself and your family. So there's bits and pieces of that. And just as a note, my family, being from Jamaica, a lot of my family members, they started as carpenters, and they started small businesses. And my grandfather on my father's side, he started the first Cadillac service center in Teaneck, New Jersey. So I think it runs in my blood. So I've always seen it. But I started as a street performer playing in the trains in New York when I was about 13 years old. And it was almost out of necessity. And from that point, I would take that money and I would buy candy, and then I'd be playing for people to recognize me and offer tips. But then I'd also be selling candy, and then I started to sell mixtapes with that, and then I started to sell shirts along with that. So that entrepreneurial spirit was there, but I would consider that hustle. And it was only until I went to business school that I understood a lot of processes, and I was able to apply that hustle in a completely different way to actually make a sustainable business. So, I just wanted to say that to say entrepreneurship is something that I think can be driven and from an early age, you know, from a lemonade stand if you want. And I encourage my daughters to think entrepreneurially now. You know, they have a 3D printer, and I say, well, how much do you think this is worth? And then how much do you think you can get for it? You know, and just those little bit of tidbits of information. But that starts out as hustle. And then oftentimes it will turn into entrepreneurship if you can put the processes in place. So, you know, that's a little bit about my story and how I view entrepreneurship. It's a lifestyle. And I've been able to start and continue and build and, you know, kind of move past certain businesses. But I always have kept an entrepreneurial hustle with me. So I think of it as a lifestyle.
Okay. When we were referring to the spirit of entrepreneurship, excuse me, what I learned there is the hustle of entrepreneurship. And I think that's just a great talking point and a great addition to the conversation. How would you frame entrepreneurship? Let's go to Keisha.
I think entrepreneurship is a very unique experience. I like to call it being stubbornly optimistic to solve a problem. You know, a lot of folks who are entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs. So they're constantly pivoting and changing and making sure that their systems are shined up and they're talking to the right audience. So I think that spirit, which can exist in anyone, it's all about that discipline and drive to stubbornly, optimistically solve a problem and provide a solution for, you know, whether it's a lemonade stand when you're a child or candy in the hallway at middle school or ringtones in college. You know, that was my path to entrepreneurship. There was always some small hustle. There was always some small shtick that always stuck until it was time to pivot. So, you know, being stubbornly optimistic about solving that problem, providing a solution for, you know, the individuals who you want to show, you know, there's a better way of doing things, saying things, being. So I think the spirit is more so just that drive, being stubborn, stubbornly curious.
Okay. And moving on to our next panelist, Marcia, how would you frame entrepreneurship?
To me, entrepreneurship is the ability to be free, to do what you want to do and to be in charge of your own division and your own goals and your own objectives. And I like that. I like the freedom to be, to see, and it's not combative, and I don't have to deal with all of the input that unnecessarily tries to penetrate you when you're in an organization. So it's important to me, for me to be able to fulfill what my goals and my objectives are. Without, I don't always want the input from the hierarchy if it's not making sense to me. So it was very important for me to start my own businesses.
Okay. We just had to stubbornly curious. And I've used a word myself that's called naturally curious. So I find there's kind of an alignment there. The bottom line is that curiosity. One of the things I want to jump in and say here about being an entrepreneur is just something to be mindful of, is when you work for someone else, the deadlines that are implied are unmovable. And when you work for yourself, in some cases, you may be moving deadlines, which could really impact your deliverables, whether they're, you know, internal deliverables or external deliverables. So just be mindful of that, folks. One of the workarounds that I use to move forward is I run my process as if I was running a newspaper, which means every day at a certain time, that newspaper has to have a certain amount of information, stories, ads, all that stuff, so it moves forward. Otherwise, it won't be out the next day for the people to consume. Those are hard deadlines. Set hard deadlines for yourself so that you can move forward with your process. As far as framing up, you know, I go down rabbit holes. Forgive me, it happens. How would you frame entrepreneurship? We're going to Nicole.
Hi. Well, as an artist, it's, you know, with visual art, when we were coming through art school, there was always this, we were obviously being trained to be entrepreneurs. We wanted to follow our own dream. We wanted to do our own work. And yet we weren't being taught any of the skills that we need to become successful entrepreneurs. We weren't taught how to communicate. We weren't taught, to communicate with a potential client. We weren't taught any of the soft, hard skills that would be used, that you would need to grow a business of your own work. And when I got and so, there's that interesting thing of being taught the entrepreneurial spirit, but not actually taught how to anything about being an entrepreneur. But I see it as working independently, being able to pursue your own ideas. It does come up against that hard piece about making a living. And so that's where things get kind of dicey. I, for instance, came out of school and decided I was going to make a living with my art, and I would do all these different kinds of things for clients. And then I came up against that thing where the client isn't happy with what you did and all this stuff. And I realized that I really wanted to, I got into education because I love talking about the ideas of art and ideas about, anyway, and also helping people learn to think independently and come up with ideas on their own. And the arts, as a segue, the arts are great for teaching you how to take all the information that you're learning and synthesize it into something new. And that is also, that is a focus of the entrepreneur too. You're creating something new with all of your experience and your growth. So.
Okay. And I'm that's interesting, because what that leads into is, how are you compensated? In other words, is there a way that you are not only compensated, monetarily, but now I think there's also a spiritual type of compensation that's involved. And that's really kind of what I pulled out of what you just said, Nicole. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, so let's go ahead now to our interview with Mark Bates, owner of Vascular Imaging Associates.
Part of my story is, in my chosen field, I decided that there was still a lot to be done. And some of the pitfalls that I saw in my career field allowed me to say, hey, look, in order to make this technology, or in order to make this career field even better, at least something that works well for me, I needed to step up to the plate and offer more. And what that meant was I had to commit myself totally to what I felt was important in order to move the profession along. And that's why I really honed down and said, okay, in order to do this without certain constraints, I would have to step out on my own as an entrepreneur, so I would have more control over the final product. The typical experience means that, once again, you have all the players in place, you have all the resources that you need, you have all the supplies that you need in order to make this a great service. But often we find that that's not the case. Often we have pitfalls. Often we have supply chain issues. We have human resource issues. We have human capital issues that we cannot just smooth over and make it work. So therefore, we have to constantly be able to critically think in order to put the pieces that you do have together and make it work seamlessly. So from the outside looking in, it looks like you haven't missed a beat, that everything was planned the way you wanted it to be planned. There's certain nuances that one needs to take, or at least to think about, as they're striving to be an entrepreneur. But the main aspect, I think, of being an entrepreneur is assembling your team. And I think that if you have a type of personality that can gather people and they're able to understand and buy into your vision, then I think that with that type of team in place, that's we think about it as like a quarterback and your offensive line. The quarterback, you have to protect the quarterback. But in order to do that, you have to trust each and every individual on your offensive line to make sure that they are protecting you as you protect them. I'm coming from a world where, when I was growing up and when we were thinking about, development, and we didn't really have the World Wide Web to look forward in the future to say, wow, I can be here in the United States and I could actually communicate with someone in Japan, for instance, and they will have access to what I'm offering. So we never really thought of it that way. If it didn't work by mail or by word of mouth or by television ad, we couldn't think that far ahead.
All right, and that was what we're getting here is we're getting these kind of overviews from different entrepreneurial sectors. And this is really interesting and dynamic because, just look at the folks on the panel and what they're bringing. And then we have Mark, who was just on, who really came in and talked about his perception, which is coming from more of a team. And I wanted to just mention that the team that is being referred to doesn't necessarily have to be the employees of your company, for example. The team that he's referring to can also be the community that is supporting your initiative. So moving along, the motivations for becoming an entrepreneur are vast, as we've heard from. Some pursue it because they feel that they are too creative for the traditional work environment. Some perhaps just need their own space, wanting to break through certain ceilings. Some want to follow their dreams or report wanting to make their own schedule. Does entrepreneurship support some of the ways unique individuals can enjoy freedom and autonomy? Or is it a potentially dangerous road with less structure and conflicting priorities? We're going to let Marcia lead the panel on that.
I don't know. I think that too often we don't really realize we know that we want to have our own business. We know that we want to do what we want to do when we want to do it, but we don't always see the whole picture that's down the road. We can try to do the layout and figure it out, but it takes time for you to actually sit in what you're doing. And how often do we really take the time to get to know all of the products that we're building and all of the customers that we're looking for? How do we build, quote unquote, that empire internally and externally? How do we work within the confines of our circles of influence to be able to deploy what we're seeing? How do we create that? And what is it that we need to help us to build the infrastructure and the structure and the products to get them to market? What is it? Do we bring in other people? Should we be confident and comfortable just doing it ourselves? Do we have enough allies around us that are mentors? Can we just be comfortable having a mentor, having people who are already doing it, who have been successful and they've reached their goals? Do we interface with them? Do we have those people in our circle of influence to help us build, who will be straight up, no chaser, and tell you the truth, to let you know where all the minefields are? It's all about those creating an infrastructure of people who have already been there, who you can trust and who trust you. You can build, but you can't always build by yourself. I want to hear what other people are doing and how they got there. I want to know the problems that they had at the beginning so that I can look out for that. I want to be able to read about and hear about things that I have not yet experienced. You see all this gray hair. We've been doing this for a minute in the workforce, but now we said, I'm not ready to sit down. I'm ready. I'm just warming up. But do we have that circle of influence around us to make certain that we are getting those answers? And programs like this are very important, and I applaud you because it's these little nuggets that you want to take back. You want to take a note. You want to be mindful of what you hear and what you do. And that you can pick up the phone and you have people who will answer you and respond and be honest, that you can trust. Those trusted mentors are critical. And my trusted My trusted people are straight up, don't chase it out. They don't care what I'm thinking and what I thought. Yeah, I can ask a question and they say, okay, but that's not what I told you to do last month. You said you wanted to do this. You want somebody that's going to be in your face with it.
Let me jump in.
Grow.
Yeah, let me just jump in right there and say, this goes back to an earlier point I made about when you're in charge of yourself, you just move your deadlines. And that can impact, you say, oh, well, that's not a priority anymore. Let's move to something else I want to do. But you have gatekeepers there. You have accountability in place to say that is not what you said. Let's stay with the program.
You have to, you really have to. And what I think is very important for me is to be able to have things on the wall that I can write so I can see my deadlines. You can do a strategic plan, you have all of the little deadlines and all that, but if you're not looking at it, if you're not paying attention to it, if you're not following it, then you're going to keep starting over and over and over again. How do you make certain that you're that person who can actually do what you said you're going to do?
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to open this up. I'm going to open up WKIM, and I want people on that platform. What am I going to do? Now we're looking at contracts that are going out. We've identified the people who are going to be sitting on that platform. They're going to have a show, X amount of days or whatever time. But we said we were going to do it. Now we're in the process. We're developing. And we did a way to sit down and say, okay, we're going to do the pilot. Let's see if people are even interested. We want information that people aren't getting generally. We want to be that different vehicle. And there's more to follow. But here's the plan. When are you going to implement it? When you going to start it? What you going to do? Who's going to be involved? What do you need? What's that infrastructure? But it's happening. And you got to make it happen. You got to make it happen so it's solid and people can depend. When you say you're going to do it at a certain time, you're going to do it at a certain time. Nothing can interrupt that.
Okay. Now, there is a plethora of apps that can be used to help with keeping yourself on track. Trello is one of them. Miro is another one. And what I'm saying there is, kind of like how Mark alluded to, the vascular contributor. Back in the beginning, we didn't have these things. We didn't have the internet. We had to literally write everything down. And almost what you're saying, Marcia, is almost like a war room kind of approach. It's like write stuff down on the wall so you can see it and you can engage with it. Let's continue with allowing some of our other panelists to jump in on this question. We're talking about the motivations being vast for entrepreneurship. Nicole, go ahead.
Well, as I've been sitting here listening, I would like to talk about a couple of people. One of them is a former student who got a job working on exhibition mounts, and can you hear me? I think if you don't have me on, okay.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, so and I've seen this happen too, where people get jobs doing certain things and then they end up developing it as their own business. And so one of these was a former student who made, when you see an exhibit in a museum or a gallery, the objects are sitting there and they're being held in a certain position because a mount maker has made the mount that holds them in place. And they also install any gallery or museum work that you see. And she would talk about all the kind of these misogynistic things that would happen to her as one of the few females working in the industry. And she ended up starting her own mount making business with two other women called Bridget Mount Making. And they've done millions of dollars worth of work in museums around the world. And so, that's something where someone solves their own problem. Yeah, and my own sister is a photographer in San Francisco, and she started out working as an assistant to someone else, and then gradually developed a successful business, shooting all kinds of work, different kinds of things for catalogs, for people's dust jackets for their books, and also live shots of events and things like that.
All right, excellent. So we're going to go
Hello?
back to Brian. Yeah, Brian, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You are now 5 by 5, as they said, military terms for you are loud and clear. Go ahead and proceed with your answer.
All-
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. I'm trying my best to keep it expedient. But let me just mention this is an extreme point of passion for me. I used to teach entrepreneurship a number of years, and I would tell the young men who I would coach and encourage that you got to believe in your dream more than anybody. It has to start with you. If you don't believe it, you can't rile people up to go and believe it. And then you might have to spend some time by yourself in order to get people to then get on board, because oftentimes people want to see traction. They want to see you get things going. They want to see that you have a plan. They want to see that you're secure in your plan. And then at some point, you go from independence to interdependence. And that could just be a community of people who support you. That could be co-workers, that could be employees, that could be co-founders, that could be partners. But there's a journey that has to happen, and it really has to start with you. And I also tell a lot of young people, and I want to be thoughtful about what I'm saying also, because everybody has their own journey. So I speak to my journey first off, but I also tell young people, you got to be wary and thoughtful about the entrepreneurial packages that are just offered online, that, oh, you could be an entrepreneur and become a millionaire overnight. You gotta be in there for the long haul. You gotta think about what you're doing, and gotta know that if you love it, it's gonna take some time, and it may not happen overnight. It may not happen over the year. It may not happen over 5 years. But if you're true to it, it will be true to you, and you will see that come back to you in tenfold if you are putting in the work. And the last point I want to just make around this is entrepreneurship is not the magic pill that helps you become a millionaire overnight. It allows you the opportunity to have what you want. But if somebody is looking for entrepreneurship to be the vehicle to procrastinate or be lazy or to just get everything they want overnight, entrepreneurship isn't that. Oftentimes, you got to be there before employees. You got to be there after employees. You go from working a 40-hour work week, and you might feel burnt out in that, to then going to 60 to 80 hours in the work week. You might have to work overnight sometimes. When it's a deadline, you have to hit it. Me personally, every single morning, every single day, and every single day I have key performance indicators. And I don't want to talk over anybody's head, but there are metrics that help me know that I'm going the right direction. And then I have milestones that I have accomplished, and I put a date to every single one of them, because if you don't put a date to it, all you're doing is talking about a dream. If you want to make a plan, you got to put a date to it. So entrepreneurship, in all honesty, requires more focus, more attention, more time, more dedication. And with that said, it's not to deter anybody, but it's to say, if you love it, it will never feel like work. And if you love it, that's how you know that that's your key performance indicator. That's how you know that you're going the right direction, because if it doesn't feel like work and you're putting in 80 hours, you're probably doing the exact thing you should be doing. But just don't fall for the quick overnight, I'm going to become a millionaire overnight. If you're doing it just for money, there's a lot of things you could do to make money. You can become an entrepreneur, work and, be entrepreneurial in someone else's business. You can put in that same amount of time and do very well in a trade. And for a lot of trades, those are entrepreneurial ventures in themselves. But sometimes, it's important to break down the entrepreneurial venture that is brand new and it comes straight from your mind and it's almost like an invention to the world. And then there are the entrepreneurial ventures that I applaud, that I respect, that are trades, like being a plumber, being an electrician, being an HVAC technician, being a carpenter. Many of the people who were speaking on the videos earlier, they have specific trades that allow them the vehicle to be an entrepreneur. And those are amazing opportunities. but just know that it takes work and dedication, and you got to hold yourself accountable more than anybody, because at the end of the day, if it works or it doesn't work, the only person you can look at is the person in the mirror.
Thank you for the insight there. And what I'm noticing about this trajectory, this overall conversation is, bottom line is you have to hold yourself accountable, when in some cases the company may hold you accountable. And I like to nod towards entrepreneurship versus entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is kind of you doing it on your own, and entrepreneurship is you having the ability to operate and be entrepreneurial within the company of somebody else. We're going to go ahead now and pull up another quick video snippet. This is CJ's food truck, and it's owned by Clooney Joseph.
You have people who are self-starters. They are trendsetters. They make their mark out there. That's innate. It's something that comes out of them. For me, I'm just passionate when I find something that I love to do. I love to do it from a place of passion and purpose, not so much from being told and being told how to execute, how I need to show up. That was something I always struggled with. So to be an entrepreneur for me was just easy, because I like to color outside the line. I have the formal education. I went to school. I checked all the boxes, and it wasn't fulfilling for me. I found my fulfillment when I was doing things that I truly believed in and could stand by. That's where I excelled. So even working in the corporate sector, did healthcare staffing, recruiting for physicians, nurses, sat on site with hospitals, helping them get their staffing in order and restructuring organizations. That skill set I apply to everything that I do, understanding that sometimes you need to pivot, understanding that there are times that you are just going to have to just step out on faith and just do something, because that's the only thing that's available to do. And then you'd be amazed of what, comes out of that. So entrepreneurship for me equals freedom. If I was to just put it in a nutshell, just having my time back to myself, doing the things I want to do within my time, even though I find that, a lot of my time is spent at this phase building this business and having a strong foundation. But that's just part of the process. So the food truck venture especially, this is very new for me. I did something that's very unfamiliar. I am not a chef by trade per se, no culinary background skills. However, I do have a degree in psychology, which helps me understand human nature, and understanding just, I see things totally different, and it's all about an experience. And I understand that we're all having an experience.
I like food in general, so I always like to see food. I don't think you can go wrong talking about food or being entrepreneur around food. It's just food is so relevant. Why is food relevant, ladies and gentlemen? Because you have to eat to live. That's why. So it's baked in. That's just the bottom line. How you consume that food may be different, but it's certainly necessary to live and succeed before you can become. Who wants to be a hungry entrepreneur? Can't study, can't focus when your stomach is grumbling. So thank you for that contribution from Clooney Joseph, owner of CJ's Food Truck. We are going to get back to our questions now and re-engage with our panel. So how can you succeed as an entrepreneur who happens to be neurodiverse? Don't get focused on the word neurodiverse, folks. We just use that so we can move forward in the conversation, all right? We don't know what that word is. That word is constantly changing. Neurodiverse, is it neuroscience? So let's not get bogged down there, because I've literally seen that word neurodiverse trigger people into a whole argument and argumentative. We're just having a conversation. So for the purpose of the conversation, we're defining that as someone with a diagnosis or physical consideration that affects how they learn, ADHD, autism, etc. Sometimes twice exceptional, which would be gifted and with challenges, and emotional consideration, perhaps depression, anxiety, PTSD, that affect how they learn, and finally, cultural or socioeconomic impacts and the way that shows up in the world. So once again, how do you succeed as an entrepreneur who happens to be neurodiverse? Keisha, can you start us off with that?
I sure can. And for everyone who thinks that is a very complex question, it is a very complex question. So I'm just going to come from my experience of working with neurodiverse populations, especially with the transition of the pandemic and how people connected via networking. A lot of the work that we do is through outreach, going into communities and providing education. That changed dramatically when the pandemic hit and everything closed. So as an entrepreneur, I had to figure out how to pivot and transition the services that I was currently offering while also being mindful of the population that I was serving and some of the effects of the pandemic that may have on how they show up in their community, how they show up in their schools, how they show up in their homes. With cannabis, cannabis is a really diverse plant that a lot of folks use for different modalities. But when it comes to medicine and mental health, that direct connection of I may not necessarily have to be able to provide for my family, that then allows me to think about the conversation I need to have and the services I need to wrap around in addition to the actual educational work we do with providing those careers. So coming back to how I show up and then empowering those around me, because it's not necessarily just me. I come from a community aspect. So some of my advisors, some of my partners, we all have to constantly check in and say, hey, are you okay? Is everything good? Sharing tips, sharing ways to breathe through the unexpected times and the unexpected world that we live in, because every day is a trigger, right? At this point, every day is a trigger. So being able to balance that while also being empathetic to the communities that we are in all aspects of our lives is important. So I think being able to tap in internally to what I do and who I am and be able to feed off of the people around me truly helps me succeed. That community support really drives a lot of the work that I do.
Okay. I wanted to just kind of restate the question again so we can remain focused, which is, how can you succeed as an entrepreneur who happens to be neurodiverse? And when we say neurodiversity, whether you're diagnosed through a precedent of diagnosis, or whether you realize that you're just, you are a unique individual. We're going to let Nicole come in now and, voice her, give us some input on the question from her perspective.
Well, as an educator, I've worked with people who are neurodiverse, and I consider myself neurodiverse. And there are strengths to whatever your diagnosis is. So, some people with autism, I know a jeweler who works very in a lot of detail and really enjoys that work. But then the communication aspect, you can, in terms of communicating with clients and things like that, one way of doing that is like I used to do it, is apply to exhibits. So you aren't having to make contacts with potential clients, you're applying to these shows. So the things that you do well, you can keep doing well. And then you kind of find ways of doing the things that you have to do that you don't do well. Like, of course, I'm not great at math, so I'm going to have an accountant working with me, and I know that costs money, but there are ways of doing that. And I think also, it becomes part of your practice. Like if you're someone who has ADHD and you're, and you tend to go from one thing to another thing to another thing, I think over time as adults, we develop ways of coping. And so what happens is, for me, for instance, I'll work on a number of different things. Always in my head, I've got this idea that I'm coming around to they're all becoming finished at some point. And as the momentum continues, and I just do that, as opposed to what I spent some time doing, thinking, oh, well, I have to do this one thing until it's absolutely done. Well, that isn't the best way of working for some people. And so you want to accept how you can turn something that might be considered a disability into a positive. The idea that, for instance, I could work on many things at once and then have them come together and be complete, instead of trying to force myself to work the way I think the culture expects me to work. And I really try to work with my students and talk to them about their skill sets and how they can adapt them. And also that whatever, why try to force yourself into working in a certain way that does not work for you and does not keep you productive?
Excellent. And this flow moving forward, it was, started with, Keisha's first contribution and then the second contribution so far on this topic. And what Keisha said that was interesting to me was this is a complex question. Mm-hmm. And each one of the contributors here, from the panel are adding to their view or their filter of what this question means. And I tried to, when I explained the question at the beginning, I tried to, be, politically correct and say, let's not get bogged down with the wording. Let's just have the conversation and extrapolate the experiences from the panelists. So yes, this is certainly a complex question, Keisha, and but it is a question that we need to ask because this is a complex subject matter. So I just want to, thank everyone so far for, making their way through some of these questions because they certainly have a lot of room for your own personal analysis. Marcia, we're talking about how you can succeed as an entrepreneur who happens to be neurodiverse, recognizing neurodiversity, whether, whether diagnosed, from a third party or internal recognition. So what are some of your talking points on success as an entrepreneur who happens to be neurodiverse?
Well, this is my first time even having a conversation about neurodiversity. So I'm not really familiar with that terminology and how it's impactful. And I'd like to yield to somebody who is a lot more invested in that conversation because I'm not an authority and I haven't really used that. So this would be a learning experience for me.
May I offer some thoughts?
I would love it.
So although I don't normally use the term neurodiversity, I can definitely acknowledge every single person has their set of challenges. And I think that it's important that first, we as people in our own ways and our own methodologies, try to understand the challenges that you have and have a level of acceptance with it, because as Nicole had mentioned, there are strengths with each challenge that you may have. And then once you understand your genius level, and then you also understand your incompetence level or your level of like growth or however you choose to frame that, then you can work within your what you're good at, and you can also grow within what you're not fantastic at. So personally, I've struggled with, although I've not been diagnosed, some people might say I have ADD because I'm all over the place. I do a lot of different things, and I'm oftentimes, somebody will ask like, hey, what are you doing today? I'm building a guitar. And then what are you doing tomorrow? I was doing a lead inspection. And then what are you doing the next day? And I'm running a marathon. And then what are you doing the next day? And then, but I ultimately went to start practicing yoga and mindfulness. And through the practice of meditation, I was actually able to start sitting still long enough to become a better version of myself. I'm still growing in the ways I'm growing, but for me, sitting still enough to do something was a challenge. And I'd start a project and I'd stop a project, and that project would still be going on for years. But that practice, and then furthering that point, running and now running marathons, the practice of doing something for an extended amount of time, I've grown in my capacity to sit in doing something for an extended amount of time. So now I can sit with a spreadsheet longer than I've ever sat with a spreadsheet. Now I can sit and write a standard operating procedure longer than I've ever been able to do it previously. And just as a quick note about yoga, yoga translates to yoga is life. And whatever you can do on a mat or whatever you do in meditation is how you show up in other places in the world. And I'm a believer, me personally, and if you resonate with that or you don't resonate with it, this is just my personal belief, that if you grow in one capacity, you grow that capacity in someplace else. So for me, what I needed to grow was being able to sit still and do the thing all the way to the finish, which is why I'm an advocate around running, because I don't like running. I hate running, actually. I like the feeling of doing it and accomplishing it and finishing, doing something that I start. And now, because I can sit through and say, all right, I'm running for 3 hours. All right, then that's a point of reference to say, if you could run for 3 hours and you didn't enjoy the entirety of it, but you did it all the way until you finished it, now you can sit there and write these emails and do not get up until you're done. And I give myself very strict deadlines and milestones to do things. And I also base it around running. And I would base it around yoga. So if I meditate for 15 minutes, now I know I have the capacity to sit still for 15 minutes. You better sit down and do that work for 15 minutes, and then you give yourself a break. But that's just how I have been able to overcome my challenges. And if it resonates with you, I hope it does. And if it doesn't, I hope you find whatever resonates with you.
Okay, thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground during this particular session. And what I would like to do now is go back, and Marsha, can you tell the folks here how to get in touch with you and what your current project is?
So WKIM Media Network Marsha Jews, MARSHA @gmail.com, and you can reach me there. I'm working with a couple of clients, Career Communications Group. We have the Women of Color STEM conference coming up next week in Detroit. So I'll be interviewing people for 3 days, and it's probably, I don't know how long per day, but it's a long time, but it's really exciting because they're really amazing women from all over the world who will be getting awards in science, technology, engineering, and math. And my other client is Lauren, artist, Lauren Cornish. And so, Nicole, so I figure you probably know him. Yep. So he's my client, and he's opening up a brand new studio down in Hampton. And he also has a studio in Fells Point, so Hamden, not Hampton. Hamden on 36th Street. So that'll be opening in the next couple of weeks. And he also has reopened the studio in Fells Point. So we're really excited. He's doing a lot of new works. And so we've been very busy. So those two things have my attention. And of course, we're doing our weekly show and looking for participants who would be interested in hosting a show on our platform. So give us a shout. We can talk about it further.
Okay, thank you very much. Nicole Fall, how do people get in touch with you, and what are you currently working on?
I've put my email address in the chat, mindartpower@gmail.com. And you can, if you look up my name, you can find my website, Nicole Fall. My husband and I have, we've retired, so we have started a business, Fall Conroy Projects. And one of the projects we just finished was a second phase of working with Brooklyn O'Malley Boys and Girls Club, and working with the kids and having them design a mural, they did drawings of their neighborhood, and then we put it together in this mural that ended up being cut out of metal, put on the windows, and because the windows needed to be covered with a protective grate, and we're looking to do more of that work. We've done a couple of projects, and we're keeping going with that. So, and I also do portfolio development with people going to high school or art school. Thank you.
Excellent. Keisha, how can the folks get in touch with you, and what are you currently working on?
Absolutely. So I'm going to drop my LinkedIn in the chat, but you can find me online everywhere as the Connected CEO. I'm currently very much blinders on till November 8th, which is election day. So we'll be working on doing our cannabis awareness events through January and through July once it is enacted. So on the flip side, I also do digital marketing and strategy for small business and entrepreneurs who are looking to build an authentic community. So you can absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn and we can talk about how we can get that started. But once again, thank you so much. This was a great opportunity and best wishes to everyone else on the panel.
Okay, thank you very much. Brian Furr, contact information and current project.
Hey, so the best way to contact me is email, mindfuldesigns@gmail.com. Mindful, MINDFUL, designs, DESIGNS, BMORE@gmail.com. So couple things about me right now. I'm running operations for a software company called Climb. We're a social emotional wellness platform for young people, teaching them how to manage challenging emotions. I'm also a yoga instructor and I do corporate events. You can find me at Fur the Yogi, Fur_the_yogi on Instagram. I also have a small batch manufacturing company right on Hartford Road. If you're local to the Morgan State area, you can come by. We're located under Zeke's Coffee. I do small batch manufacturing for other organizations, B2B mainly. Quick note about that, we're doing the new sign for Red Emma's on Greenmount Avenue. So when you see the sign, just think about us. And we also did the Safe Street sign on Bel Air Road. We mainly do custom art, custom signs, custom instruments, and custom furniture. And in a very happy note, I'm visiting my grandfather who's turning 100. So I'm very excited, which is why I'm on the road right now. So I'm chock full of fun and feel free to contact me. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure listening to your content and your contribution here at the Dean Talks. I want to go to Ebony Kinney for big hits and takeaways briefly here as we wrap up the Dean Talks. Ebony?
Okay, this is a great conversation. I was tingly the whole time. My hairs were standing up on the back of my neck. So great insights. Thank each and every speaker that was able to join us. I see people in the chat also chiming in on, guests chiming in on who they are. Look for us online. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll continue to unfold and unpack this content. And we have created our first emotional transparency tags, which will allow children to identify what kind of emotions they're feeling to their teachers in their classroom. So that's a project we're working on right now, and look forward to talking to you more about it. Just reach out. Thanks.
And thank you again, Ebony. Ebony, just for all intents and purposes, Ebony is created this whole concept. So while you didn't hear a lot from her, understand that she does a lot in the background to pull all of this together. This is the Dean Talks. And next session in October will be relationships and commitment. That's going to be an interesting Dean Talks. You can always visit ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org for information on the Dean Talks and ways to contact Ebony Kinney or myself, Stephen King. So thank you again, folks, for listening. Thank you for participating. As always, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Ebony. And thank you to Stephen King. Sure, no problem. Visit ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org for more information on the Dean Talks. We will see you next month. Thanks.